Imagine living in a world where you work from sunrise to sunset, yet your children still cry from hunger, while nobles feast in golden halls and pay nothing at all. This was the harsh reality of late 18th century France, a land of stark contrasts and simmering discontent. In those days, French society was rigidly divided into three estates. At the pinnacle stood the clergy and nobility, basking in a world of privilege, wealth, and power. They donned fine silks, dined on exquisite delicacies, and enjoyed lives of leisure in opulent chateaux. These elite few, comprising barely 2% of the population, owned vast swathes of land and held sway over the lives of millions. Beneath them, carrying the crushing weight of taxes and hardship, stood the third estate, the common people. This vast majority included everyone from humble peasants toiling in the fields to skilled artisans in bustling cities and even the rising merchant class. Despite their diverse backgrounds, they shared a common burden, the responsibility of funding the entire nation through their labor and taxes. The disparity between the estates was staggering. While a noble might spend more on a single outfit than a peasant family earned in a year, those same families often struggled to put even the most meager meals on their tables. Poor harvests in the years leading up to 1789 had sent the price of bread, the staple food of the poor, soaring to unprecedented heights. In the countryside, desperate farmers watched their children waste away from malnutrition. In Paris, long lines of haggard workers formed outside bakeries each morning, hoping there would still be a loaf left when their turn came. Yet even as the people suffered, the excesses of the royal court seemed to know no bounds. King Louis XVI and his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, lived in a bubble of luxury at the Palace of Versailles. This sprawling complex, with its meticulously manicured gardens and gilded halls, stood as a glaring symbol of the monarchy's detachment from the plight of ordinary citizens. Stories of the Queen's lavish parties and expensive fashions circulated among the hungry masses, fueling resentment and disbelief. The king, well-meaning but indecisive, found himself trapped between competing interests. The nation's coffers were depleted after years of costly wars and financial mismanagement. Louis XVI attempted to implement reforms and raise new taxes, but he faced fierce resistance from the nobility, who jealously guarded their tax-exempt status and other privileges. The parliaments, regional courts dominated by noble judges, blocked the king's efforts at every turn. As the crisis deepened, new winds of change were sweeping through French society. The ideas of the Enlightenment, championed by brilliant thinkers like Rousseau, Voltaire, and Diderot, began to take root in the minds of the educated classes. These philosophers questioned the very foundations of the old order, arguing for natural rights, equality before the law, and the concept that government should serve the people, not the other way around. The American Revolution, which had concluded just a few years earlier, provided a powerful example of these principles put into action. French soldiers who had fought alongside the American colonists returned home with tales of a nation where common men had overthrown their king and established a republic based on the ideals of liberty and equality. These stories ignited the imaginations of many in France, who began to dream of a different world, one where birth did not determine destiny, and where even the humblest citizen had a voice in shaping the nation's future. By 1789, the simmering tensions in French society had reached a boiling point. Faced with a looming financial catastrophe, King Louis XVI reluctantly called for a meeting of the Estates General, an ancient assembly that had not convened in over 150 years. Representatives from all three estates gathered at Versailles, ostensibly to find solutions to the kingdom's fiscal woes. However, it quickly became apparent that the Third Estate, representing the vast majority of the population, would once again be sidelined. The voting system favored the clergy and nobility, ensuring that no meaningful reforms could pass without their approval. Frustration mounted as the commoners' delegates found themselves ignored and humiliated, their pleas for fairness falling on deaf ears. In a bold move that would change the course of history, the representatives of the Third Estate broke away from the official proceedings. They declared themselves the National Assembly, claiming the right to speak for the entire nation. When soldiers tried to lock them out of their meeting hall, they gathered in a nearby tennis court and took a solemn oath not to disperse until they had given France a new constitution. The king's attempts to reassert control only inflamed the situation. Rumors spread that Louis XVIII was massing troops around Paris, preparing to dissolve the National Assembly by force. The people of Paris, already on edge from months of food shortages and political uncertainty, erupted into open revolt. On July 14, 1789, a day that would be forever etched in the annals of history, angry crowds surged through the streets of the capital. Their target was the Bastille, an imposing medieval fortress that had long served as a prison for political dissidents. Though it held only 7 prisoners at the time, the Bastille stood as a potent symbol of royal authority and oppression in the minds of the people. The fortress's small garrison was quickly overwhelmed by the determined mob. As the smoke cleared and the last defenders surrendered, the fall of the Bastille sent shockwaves throughout France and beyond. It was more than just the capture of a building. It was the moment when the people realized their own power, when centuries of pent-up frustration and dreams of a better future exploded into action. News of the Bastille's fall spread like wildfire across the country. In towns and villages, ordinary citizens began to arm themselves and form militias. The old structures of authority crumbled as local officials fled or switched sides. A wave of panic, known as the Great Fear, swept through rural areas, as peasants, fearing a noble conspiracy to crush the revolution, attacked chateaux and burned feudal records. In Versailles, the king and his advisors reeled from the rapidly unfolding events. Louis XVI, who had initially dismissed the Paris uprising as a minor disturbance, now found himself facing a full-blown revolution. The balance of power had shifted dramatically, and the monarchy would never be the same. The French Revolution had begun in earnest, born from a volatile mix of economic hardship, social inequality, and the intoxicating promise of liberty. In the months and years that followed, France would be transformed in ways that its people could scarcely have imagined. The old order of privilege and absolutism would be swept away, replaced by new ideals of citizenship, equality, and the rights of man. Yet the path ahead would be far from smooth. The revolution would face numerous challenges, both from within and without. It would inspire hope and terror in equal measure, as lofty ideals clashed with the harsh realities of political upheaval and war. The events set in motion on that summer day in 1789 would reshape not just France, but the entire world, leaving an indelible mark on the course of human history. As the dust settled on the ruins of the Bastille, the people of France stood at the threshold of a new era. The cries of Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité echoed through the streets, a rallying call for a nation determined to forge its own destiny. The French Revolution had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The French Revolution brought about profound changes to France's political landscape, ushering in an era of constant turmoil and rapid transitions between various systems of government. This period of instability reflected the deep divisions that had emerged within the country as it grappled with the aftermath of overthrowing centuries of monarchical rule. In the immediate wake of the revolution, France attempted to maintain a semblance of its traditional governance structure through the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. From 1791 to 1792, revolutionaries sought to preserve the role of the king while significantly curtailing his powers through the implementation of a constitution. This compromise, however, proved short-lived. King Louis XVI's ill-fated attempt to flee the country in what became known as the Flight to Varennes shattered any remaining trust between the monarch and his subjects. This betrayal ultimately led to the downfall of the monarchy, marking a decisive turning point in France's political evolution. With the monarchy's collapse, France boldly declared itself a republic in 1792, embarking on a new chapter in its history. The First Republic, which lasted until 1795, was a period fraught with internal conflict and external warfare. While the centuries-old institution of monarchy had been dismantled, the nation struggled to find unity in its newfound republican identity. The absence of a unifying figurehead left a power vacuum that various factions sought to fill, leading to intense political rivalries and ideological clashes. As the young republic grappled with these challenges, it entered one of its darkest periods, the Reign of Terror. From 1793 to 1794, the radical Jacobin faction, led by the infamous Maximilien Robespierre, seized control of the government. They instituted a regime of fear and violence, using the guillotine as their primary instrument of power. Thousands were executed during this time, including nobles, clergy, and even moderate revolutionaries who were deemed insufficiently committed to the cause. The Reign of Terror represented the revolution's most extreme manifestation, as it sought to purge all perceived enemies of the new order. Following the excesses of the Terror, France attempted to find a middle ground with the establishment of the Directory in 1795. This five-man executive body was intended to bring stability and moderation to the nation's governance. However, the Directory's rule, which lasted until 1799, was plagued by a host of problems. Corruption ran rampant within its ranks, and its inefficient bureaucracy struggled to address the country's pressing issues. Moreover, the Directory faced ongoing unrest from both royalist sympathizers and radical revolutionaries, each seeking to pull the nation in opposite directions. This rapid succession of political systems within a single decade revealed the immense challenges France faced in building a stable democracy after centuries of absolutist monarchy. The nation had experimented with constitutional monarchy, republic, and near dictatorship in quick succession, each transition accompanied by violence and upheaval. This political instability underscored the difficulty of forging a new national identity and system of governance in the wake of such a monumental revolution. The tumultuous aftermath of the French Revolution had far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond the borders of France. It sparked a series of wars with other European powers as monarchies across the continent viewed the revolutionary ideals with fear and hostility. These conflicts would reshape the map of Europe and set the stage for the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, whose military successes would eventually lead him to seize power and establish yet another new system of government. Internally, the revolution's legacy was equally profound and complex. While it had succeeded in dismantling the old feudal order and establishing the principle of equality before the law, the practical implementation of these ideals proved challenging. The rapid shifts in power left deep scars on French society, with different factions harboring resentments and conflicting visions for the nation's future. The revolution's impact on French culture and society was equally transformative. Traditional institutions, particularly the Catholic Church, saw their influence dramatically reduced. The revolutionaries' attempts to create a new civic religion and calendar reflected their desire to break completely with the past and forge a new national identity based on reason and republican virtues. Education and the arts also underwent significant changes during this period. The revolutionaries sought to create a more meritocratic system, opening up opportunities that had previously been reserved for the privileged classes. However, the instability of the era also led to the destruction of many cultural treasures and the suppression of artistic expression that did not align with revolutionary ideals. The economic consequences of the revolution and its aftermath were mixed. While the abolition of feudal dues and the redistribution of church lands benefited many peasants and bourgeois citizens, the constant warfare and political instability took a heavy toll on France's economy. Inflation, food shortages, and the disruption of trade networks created hardships for much of the population, particularly in urban areas. As France entered the 19th century, the legacy of the revolution continued to shape its political and social landscape. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity remained powerful forces in French society, even as the nation struggled to find a stable form of government that could effectively implement these principles. The experience of the revolutionary period left an indelible mark on the French national consciousness, influencing political debates and social movements for generations to come. The French Revolution and its turbulent aftermath serve as a powerful reminder of the complexities involved in radical political change. While it succeeded in overthrowing an oppressive ancien regime, the revolution also unleashed forces that proved difficult to control. The rapid succession of different political systems in the years following 1789 demonstrated both the potential and the perils of attempting to rebuild a society from the ground up. Ultimately, the French Revolution's legacy is one of profound transformation and ongoing debate. It set in motion ideas and changes that would reshape not only France, but much of the Western world. The struggles and experiments of this period continue to offer valuable lessons about the nature of political power, the challenges of implementing democratic ideals, and the delicate balance between order and liberty in times of radical change. The French Revolution, a pivotal moment in European history, brought about profound changes that reshaped France and influenced the world. However, one of its darkest chapters was the Reign of Terror, a period from 1793 to 1794, when revolutionary leaders, particularly Robespierre and the Jacobins, employed violence to maintain their grip on power. During this tumultuous time, mass executions became commonplace. The guillotine, a symbol of revolutionary justice, claimed the lives of approximately 16,000 people. Many more found themselves imprisoned, their fates uncertain in the chaos that engulfed the nation. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion and fear, as anyone could be accused of being against the revolution. Nobles, priests, moderates, and even former revolutionaries were not safe from the blade of the guillotine. In their quest to protect liberty, the Jacobins paradoxically created a dictatorship more oppressive than the monarchy they had overthrown. Power became increasingly centralized, and the ideals of the revolution were twisted to justify brutal repression. The Reign of Terror cast a long shadow over the revolutionary cause, discrediting radical revolutionaries and leaving France exhausted and disillusioned. This dark period served as a stark reminder of how revolutions can turn against their own ideals, replacing one form of tyranny with another. The lofty goals of liberty, equality, and fraternity seemed to crumble in the face of violence and paranoia. The terror demonstrated the dangerous potential of unchecked revolutionary fervor, as those who claimed to fight for freedom became the new oppressors. As France emerged from the Reign of Terror, the political landscape remained unstable. The chaos of the 1790s created a vacuum that called for a strong leader to restore order and direction. That leader would emerge in the form of Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant military strategist who had risen quickly through the ranks during the wars of the Revolution. In 1799, Napoleon seized his opportunity. He staged a coup d'état, overthrowing the Directory, the weak government that had followed the Terror, and establishing the consulate, Napoleon's promise of stability, order and glory for France resonated with a populace weary of turmoil and uncertainty. Many citizens, exhausted by years of revolutionary upheaval, welcomed his strong leadership. Napoleon's ascent marked a turning point in the revolution. By 1804, he had consolidated his power to such an extent that he crowned himself Emperor of the French. This act effectively ended the revolutionary period and ushered in a new era of French history. The ideals of the revolution, however, did not disappear entirely under Napoleon's rule. Though Napoleon ruled as a dictator, he preserved and spread many revolutionary principles throughout France and beyond. One of his most significant legacies was the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system that established legal equality, religious tolerance and meritocracy. This code would influence legal systems across Europe and beyond for generations to come. Under Napoleon's rule, careers were open to talent rather than birth, a stark departure from the rigid social hierarchies of the Ancien Regime. This meritocratic approach allowed capable individuals to rise through the ranks of society and government based on their abilities rather than their lineage. Napoleon's conquests also served to spread revolutionary ideals across Europe. As French armies marched across the continent, they brought with them the concepts of nationalism, legal equality, and administrative reform. Many of the territories conquered or influenced by Napoleon saw significant changes in their social and political structures as a result. However, Napoleon's rule was not without its contradictions. While he preserved certain revolutionary principles, he also curtailed many of the freedoms that the revolution had fought to establish. Press censorship became widespread, and Napoleon ruled as an autocrat, concentrating power in his own hands. In many ways, he embodied both the achievements and the contradictions of the revolution itself. The impact of the French Revolution extended far beyond the borders of France. Its shockwaves reverberated across Europe, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the continent. The success of the revolution struck fear into the hearts of monarchies across Europe. Kings and nobles watched with growing alarm as the French people overthrew their monarchy and established a republic. They feared that their own subjects might be inspired to rebel, threatening the established order that had prevailed for centuries. This fear led to the formation of coalitions of European powers united in their opposition to revolutionary France. These alliances would engage in a series of conflicts known as the Revolutionary Wars, which lasted from 1792 to 1802. These wars would later evolve into the Napoleonic Wars, as Napoleon led French armies across Europe. Despite the efforts to contain it, the spread of revolutionary ideas proved difficult to stop. The principles of liberty, equality, and popular sovereignty inspired uprisings and reforms in various parts of Europe. Countries such as Belgium, Italy, and Poland saw movements influenced by the ideals of the French Revolution, as people began to question traditional authority and demand greater rights and representation. The wars that followed the revolution reshaped Europe's political map. French armies, first under the revolutionary government and later under Napoleon, fought against nearly every major European power. These conflicts led to significant territorial changes, the fall of old regimes, and the rise of new political entities across the continent. The legacy of the French Revolution and its aftermath continued to influence European politics and society long after Napoleon's final defeat in 1815. The ideas of nationalism, constitutionalism, and popular sovereignty that had been unleashed would continue to shape political discourse and movements throughout the 19th century and beyond. The French Revolution, from its idealistic beginnings to the dark days of the Reign of Terror and the subsequent rise of Napoleon, represents a complex and transformative period in history. It demonstrated both the potential for radical change and the dangers of unchecked revolutionary zeal. Hey, don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. You won't want to miss it.